It just took me like 5 minutes to hit record because I didn't know how I wanted to start this video out. I was like, how do I phrase this? So, since getting diagnosed, like I couldn't have anticipated that it was going to affect me the way that it has with autism. I was diagnosed with ADHD like 3.5 years ago, and that was its whole other thing. But the autism diagnosis has hit me so much harder. I'm having all these realizations lately where it's like, gosh, like this was the autism, this was autism, this was the autism. But really it's like it's been everywhere. But one thing that I want to talk about right now that has been, I think, one of the hardest parts of it is that I am hurting for the parts of myself that didn't have the same understanding. Like I imagine if I had known this about myself so much earlier, it would have spared me so much pain and misunderstanding and hatred for myself. Cuz that's what I've been thinking is like I used to hate everything about myself. And I realized when I was writing today that so much of that hatred had to do with my neurodivergence, because when you're neurodivergent, it's in every single aspect of your life. There's not one aspect of your life that is not hit with the aspects of your neurodivergence because it's so core to who you are. And I I spent so long trying to change who I was, and now that I realize I could never change these things, that they have always been and always will be part of who I am, it just seems like such a shame. Like, even more so that I spent over 20 years of my life rejecting those things about myself and trying to change it. Wasted so much time hating myself when I could have spent all of that time learning to understand myself and accommodate my difficulties instead of thinking that I could just try really hard to overcome them. And then it also hits me more that it really is a disability. And I did not have what I needed. And it's like, it's not a competition. It's not a suffering competition. That's not what I'm here to say. Okay? That's not what this is about. I just know I can think back to my behavior and I'm like, I think so much about my sensitivity, always being called a crybaby and never being able to stop crying, always struggling with how much I spoke and like the pace I spoke and like constantly being misunderstood because I didn't know how to communicate in the ways that other people did and I didn't know what was wrong with me. But then when I would express that I felt like I needed help, then everybody told me that I didn't, that I was fine and that it was all in my head and I needed to just try harder. And then the last 20 years of my life has been me trying harder, trying my absolute hardest and it not being enough and me not understanding why. And I think about, oh gosh, it was just so difficult for me. If I had known, it would have spared me so much difficulty. And then there's the other aspect of it where in my case, I didn't have struggles academically, not in the actual educational aspect. Like my grades were really good. I was even in advanced classes, right? I was not quite like a gifted student, but I always took advanced classes, right? All the way even up until high school. I was literally taking college courses in high school and everything, right? But I always struggled in the social aspects. And I didn't have a good comparison as to like what a regular teenage struggle was versus like a neurodivergent teenage struggle. I just always had that feeling that something was weird about me, something was off about me, but it wasn't enough for anybody else to take me seriously. I had always struggled with anxiety and depressive symptoms. I never got the help that I needed whenever I was whenever I really needed it most. And I got diagnosed with ADHD when I was 21 because I sought out a diagnosis on my own, and somehow I still had insurance, which I don't. COVID messed with a lot of things. So it somehow extended things and I didn't even know I had it. And when I found out I had it, I was like, I'm going to take advantage of this while I can. So I started therapy. I started figuring out all of these mental health issues that I had, and I started working on them, and a lot of things got better. Like my anxiety and like my PTSD symptoms, a lot of that eased up. Like I I started feeling like more free, right? And I thought that I could just heal my way out of my problems. Like, yeah, there's triggers to my anxiety and to my depression, and as long as I recognize those and I can get rid of those, like I can work through them and they won't be obstacles for me anymore. But then once we got through a lot of that and I showed significant improvement in my anxiety and depressive symptoms, and I felt like I was learning how to balance out how to work with my ADHD, right? Then I was still struggling, and I was like, I'm like just expressing to my therapist. I was like, I can't keep living like this. I was constantly getting burnt out by work, no matter what job I was doing. And I would try to change my hours and like move around at work depending on like a different position at work that I felt like would be less stressful. And then I even cut back my hours as much as I could, but I was still struggling. And my therapist, we started I guess just the more I as time went on and with more time with her, then she started to recognize like, wait, maybe, there's more to this, and a lot of pieces were getting put together. And that was whenever we decided to pursue an autism diagnosis because we were like, it would make a lot of sense. And I had suspected it for a long time because I follow a lot of autistic um specifically high masking women, not specifically high masking, but women with autism and ADHD, and a lot of them do happen to be high masking, and I related a lot to their stuff. So like to the content that they made and their experiences. So um it wasn't out of the blue. But it was still like shocking once I got like whenever she suggested it, I already had it in my mind that I was autistic because I knew that she wouldn't suggest it if she wasn't almost positive that I would that the assessments would end up revealing that I did fit criteria for autism, right? Um and it just made so much sense to me. And that was a little bit over a month ago, and I officially got my diagnosis just a few weeks ago. A couple weeks ago, I think. I have no sense of time whatsoever. But it's like everything. Every day there's something new. My sensitivity is the one thing that stands out to me the most. Just even up until high school, even now. But I thought that I had like over time, from elementary school up until high school, I cried a lot less in middle school and high school, right? But in elementary school, I remember crying pretty frequently whenever I got frustrated just about anything, and being so embarrassed that I couldn't hold back my tears, and being so embarrassed that I cried so easily compared to everybody else. Cuz I don't remember actually seeing anybody else in my classroom ever cry. But I would cry pretty frequently whenever I would get frustrated with a lesson. Like, say if they would move on and I wasn't caught up enough to like know what was going on, or I got distracted and I like needed something repeated to me, and I didn't have the help I needed. But even up until high school, I remember getting nervous to the point that I would cry. Nobody else around me did that. And I felt so ridiculous for it, and I rejected that part of me, and I didn't understand it for so long. And then when I got my ADHD diagnosis and I found out that, being sensitive, that can be a factor, being like, I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then I'm like, there's just more on top of it. And I'm realizing, okay, you can't heal your way out of autism or out of ADHD. You can do things to accommodate it, but you cannot change the way that your brain is wired. You can take medication to accommodate also. You can do therapy. You can accommodate in every way that you can, but you cannot get rid of the disorder at its core. It's like, yes, you can heal your way out of a lot of anxiety and depression that you've experienced, like the symptoms, and you can address the triggers, but you can't do that with autism and with ADHD. But now that I know that, at least now I know that I can accommodate it. I know that it's a valid struggle, because of the way that my body functions, and it's not a personal failure of mine. It's not because I didn't try hard enough. In fact, it's like reassured me that I actually need to slow down and rest. That rest is valid, that it's necessary, and that I'm only going to run myself into the ground if I try harder. And in a society where they want you to work, 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 and they try to get you to think that your worth is based on how hard you work and provide to society, it's not an easy thing. This whole time talking about this, I've been like really tense, like my chest and like my heart is like hurting because it's just there's so much about it. And a part of me is like sick of it. Like, I don't want to keep thinking about this every day, but this is just how it is. I don't know. I hear that it gets better after a few months. But right now it's like I feel like gosh, my mind has been racing like crazy and it's been hard to sleep. It's like the insomnia. It's just like my body is so exhausted, but my brain wants to keep going. And the thoughts are just overlapping and there's so much going on, and I feel like this is making my ADHD symptoms flare up. I've been forgetting things so much more easily lately and getting distracted so much more easily lately, and it's just like right now I'm just going as easy on myself as I can and doing my best to give myself as much grace as possible. And I'm grateful to know this about myself now, even if other people aren't going to believe it. It's like that's not my problem. So, yep. I hope this helped anybody who's able to relate. As much as I'm sick about talking about it, I know that I want to talk about it and I know it'll help people to talk about it. So, and I think this will be really good for me to document for the future. So, anyways, thanks for listening. I hope you got something out of this. Yeah, bye.